Bob was told that they normally just enable and disable those rules for the audits, and they forgot this time. So that kind of focuses that puts the spotlight on that 18% that we were talking about. They passed some sort of scrutiny, and it doesn't have to be PCI. I do want to make that point.
Yeah, but with 80+%.
PCI is not the only thing that's doing crazy things.
Wait, real quick. If you're coming in for the password talk, it's been canceled.
Yes.
Yep.
The 5 o'clock talk has, the speaker was unable to make it, so this is PCI, as sexy as it is, and we're going to go a little bit long, and then we're going to go to the Q&A room. With that, sir, you have an intelligent and articulate question and or comment.
All right. So one of you mentioned that security, does compliance equal security? And I would say that compliance is a subset of security. So if you're secure, you're going to be compliant. And I agree with you 100% that
that's not necessarily true.
Not necessarily true?
No.
Okay.
I've been in environments where we have been entirely compliant and completely unsecure, and I've been in environments where we're completely secure and completely non-compliant. Because once you've got a set of rules that are proscriptive, if you're trying to do something that's better than the proscriptive rule, you're doing it wrong.
Well, there's also a perspective thing. I like to say PCI has nothing to do with security for any one individual company, but I don't know that we can make any sort of statement about effectiveness as we look at the population yet. Right. But that's
the whole concept of compensating controls too, right? I mean, compensating controls could be really crappy ones that you're tweaking, or really great ones that don't fit the mold.
So you have to write a document about compensating controls if you're using two-factor authentication to explain why you don't have good passwords. Of course, there's more to it than that, but
I'm not defending it. I'm
you know,
just
also
saying.
compensating controls involves Corvettes. No, wait, that's a different sort of compensation.
But you know, Christoph used to have a great diagram where he would show on a scale of 1 to 10 how important this was to audit and how important it was to security. And you want to look for the ones that are high score for both, right? Some are distracting from your overall security program, and some of them are highly affinitized and aligned with.
Thanks.
Good afternoon. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to address the panel. I actually represent, from a numbers perspective, that bottom of the barrel. We have 60 people in my organization. I have an IT staff that I'm technically part of, even though I'm the security guy, and they look at me funny when I mention I'm also IT, of 5 individuals. We are also in the hospitality business, so we're in that segment of the population that's had a huge amount of breaches over the past year.
You've changed all your default passwords on your point of sale systems, and you don't use PC anywhere, right, please? If not, then, sir, don't bother talking. Go somewhere and do good.
I've heard a lot about how PCI is awfully hard to maintain once you get it, and I say that's bullshit. The amount of work necessary to gain PCI is significantly higher than the amount of work to maintain it. Once you've gone through all the effort to, if you've done it right, that's a huge if.
Well, for your portion of the sample, right, that may or may not be true. But I can guarantee you, from my experience with the top level 1 and 2 merchants, not so much.
We're a top level 1 merchant. We're also a service provider. So we have to meet even more rigid standards than your top level 1 merchants.
But you got 60 folks.
Yeah, and real quick.
Not 50,000.
No.
It's not a universally true statement. I mean, if you're doing everything perfectly, you still have to prove it every year.
I'm hearing from you guys as if it's universally true that it's hard to do. No, it's fucking not. Not if you do it right. It's neither hard to do nor is it easy to do. It's worthwhile to do.
If I had insinuated that it was universally true,
if I had insinuated that how we do it.
If I had insinuated that I thought it was universally true, then I'm a bad statistician and I apologize. I think what I was stating was here was the data that showed an overwhelming proportion that it is difficult.
No, that's a misrepresentation of what that data is. It's a drastic simplification of what that data is. That data shows that people chose not to not that it was hard to do. Please don't
It may be
misrepresent the
easy
data.
in certain environments, but I think the data is pretty clear that
right, it's
for a lot of
harder
people
than
it
most
is,
of them
it is
were able
not.
to do.
But it
Right.
would be good to take this into the Q&A room and let
Yep.
let the
Offline.
next
Here
question-
comes the hook. Thank you.
Thank you, though, because you do make a good point. Actually, that point addresses something that's been made before, which is that for some organizations, PCI is holding us back. But, sir, you have a question and a microphone.
Yeah, so you're right, Jack. PCI has made a lot of people a lot of money. I've got a client who was able to convince their QSA that their call center PCs were out of scope because they only handle one card number at a time. My question, sure. My question is, in the experience of the QSAs or ex-QSAs in the room, are the folks handling the PCI compliance programs now still security folks? Because what I'm seeing is they're folks from the business, they're folks from maybe a business ops background, but they're not security folks. Who's writing the checks?
It's a mix. I'll throw out the first comment. It's a mix. So I see organizations. I'm an ex-QSA. Don't hold it against me. Don't you even start over there, Mr. Angry Birds. And I got a few others in this room. Yeah, she who's laughing in the front. But
We all have blood on our hands.
right. But it's totally dependent on company. I mean, some places it's internal audit, some places it's just the security team, some places it's random smatterings of IT. I think that's totally a subjective thing.
And sometimes it's a dedicated department.
Yeah, it could be.
This is the
Exactly.
PCI compliance department in those
Yep.
50,000 person organizations.
Agreed.
Cool. So,
Any disagreements?
quick reminder, if you're here for the 5 o'clock talk, you're
Shit out of luck.
what he said.
They didn't show.
That one didn't show, and so because PCI is so damn sexy, we're going to continue with the next question, sir.
Right. So you were talking about debit cards being a great solution, but maybe can you expand upon why it is and give a little more detail behind it? Because my understanding of debit cards, at least in the United States, that's tied to my bank account, and if it gets
You're doing it
stolen,
wrong.
I'm screwed. All my thousands of dollars are in that
Yeah,
are in that
you're doing
account
it
are
wrong.
gone.
Well, it's funny. There's lots of good examples around the world of debit card implementations that work. The way the United States is doing debit card implementation is by trying to tag it onto the credit card system.
It's right, you silly Canadian. If the United States is doing it, it's the right way.
Right. So anyways, we've got this other system called Interac. And you're absolutely right. It's tied to your bank account. But what you've inherited in a negative way from the cards is you've inherited their risk model that says if you get violated, it's all your fault. The real way... Yeah, it's nice
looking
to be
happier,
touched
actually,
while
right
being
now.
violated.
No, he's happy now, Jack.
The way that we do it instead is we say, you know what, if that card is compromised, sure, the money's going to pop out of your bank account, but it's going to pop right in the next day, or at the least that same day, because the system. I mean, shit, I got my first debit card when I was like 7 or 8 years old. It's been situated for so long that Canadians are out of the habit of carrying cash. We don't do checks like the United States does. I don't think anybody does checks like the United States does. So we've got this system that is a fixed transaction cost. It's always the same. It's like 6 cents per transaction for the merchants, that utilizes the same sort of chip and pin terminals that you're accustomed to. It does have that tie back to your bank account. So it's not a credit system. It's very definitely a debit system, but it's not tied to the brands. It's not part of that ecosystem. It's not using that processing hardware. It's not using this ridiculous bullshit where your credit limit is updated by the second, but you may or may not find out what the transaction was for 3 or 4 days. It's a different system. It's a real-time system that's designed to be real-time from scratch. Oh yeah, the statement is, the big thing is that there be protections on the account, and that doesn't exist here because you're piggybacking it on a system that is broken by design. And so you're inheriting all that brokenness, only instead of it being with fake money that you haven't paid for yet, it's with real money that you thought you had.
Hey, did you see that sign in the back that said Tim Horton sucks? Look over there. Next question.
Next question.
Hey guys, so I think a lot of what you guys have been talking about is pretty applicable. I think what a lot of people in this room are thinking of as level 1 and level 2 merchants. When they think about all the PCI controls, what are your thoughts in terms of the usefulness of the self-assessment questionnaire and whether or not level 3 and level 4 merchants should even be allowed to handle credit cards outside of.
Do you know what?
Back away from the microphone.
Do you know what? And anytime you ask me how much I weigh, I'm going to give you the best answer possible. That shit that comes up on the scale is
I am
so
not drunk.
wrong. Yeah, I am not
Self-assessment?
fat.
I can lie to you as well as your QSA.
So, any thoughts on how to solve that issue? Because first of all, we
like
don't know
my
how
grade
many
4
level 4s
teacher.
are incompliant.
Transparent. Well, that and transparency, right? Let's see numbers on breaches and self-assessment.
And actually, I think Mr. Arlen actually said it well before, the concept of random audits.
Yeah.
I don't care if you do your own SAQ or whatever it is. I mean, however you answer the questions is fine, but somebody at some point is going to show up unannounced and check whether or not you're full of shit. I think that's the right answer, honestly. Not planning it and having everybody going, look at our controls, right? I mean, that doesn't work well.
So Mike Don, who fought me on this, right? PCI was awesome, right?
Wait a minute. Mike Don fought you on something?
Shush. So
Arm wrestling.
He's got a really great blog post on this. So he's at Chaotic Mind, I think is what the blog is called.
Yep.
And he talks about not the self-assessment as a bad thing, but as a great thing, like as a way to possibly completely avoid this. It's like SOX self-attestation without the jail time. And his point was, if you actually care about security and it is getting in your way, you should self-assess, because then you can redirect the time and budget to more important things. Because one of the assumptions in the self-assessment is they might cheat the system that doesn't really work anyhow. Like, in some cases, like, so what? They passed, they failed, they didn't. All that really matters is failures. So instead of like regulating a hypothesis of controls that might stop it, penalize people when they fail. I mean, I'm not saying completely get rid of the thing, but he saw that if in fact you determine in your risk assessment it's hurting you more than it's helping you, he's encouraging you to do the self-assessment.
Well, I'm just thinking if you add up all the money that the banks spend, or the processing, collecting these SAQs, dealing with them, and then you think about all the fraud that occurs and how much that costs, would it be cheaper for the banks just to give them end-to-end encryption and be done with it?
Or tokenization to eliminate scope.
But the system doesn't support that. Remember, we're talking about something that was designed 50 years ago. It's not built to do that sort of thing, which is why, pulling up that example, go and have a look at how Interac works. It's completely different. It's what we use for interbranch stuff, like when I take my bank card and shove it in a different branch or a different bank's ABMs. That's how it works. It's the same thing that I run through the card reader at the grocery store. It's a different system with a different set of constraints, with a different set of design criteria than something that's going to work in Azerbaijan to make sure that your taxi driver gets paid. And you find out whether or not that payment cleared instantly, as far as your credit limit is concerned, and 3 or 4 days later when eventually they get around to telling you what your transactions were. It's just that the system itself is fundamentally flawed.
So let's grab the next question. But just because you mentioned end-to-end encryption, which solves all of our problems, I just wanted to bring this slide up that Alex might actually just chuckled, and that's all I needed. That made my point. Last year, 90%. This year, 89% of those folks that found themselves on the Verizon data breach investigations report, they got the encryption bit right. So the people in this room that have been saying encryption doesn't solve all your problems, and maybe some of the people that have been saying stuff like encryption is sexy because it keeps the attacker from getting discovered, may have a point. And you have a point.
A couple, actually. One, I agree with you. A CISP does not make a good QSA. In fact, oftentimes it's the opposite. A good auditor actually has to have years and years of experience and actually know what the hell they're doing. It pisses me off to go in and actually clean up or audit somebody and say, hey, your auditor totally got it wrong last year, and you've got a lot of work to do. So, but I think the other part of it, talking about self-assessments, is it's a good opportunity for security or IT staff to bring in processes and procedures